Well, good afternoon to all the viewers of the Rural Progress Summit. My name is Mike Espy, a former Secretary of Agriculture, but also a member of Congress for about 7 years. And for me, this discussion is very appropriate because this discussion is all about the next Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is a 5-year legislative vehicle that directs, guides, monitors, regulates all of the farm years, farm programs, farm spending, export programs, rural development, nutrition, commodities, all of that is included in the Farm Bill. And so we'll be talking about that for the next few minutes. We've got 3 experts. So let's get started, guys. I want each one of you, before we get into questions, I'll just say hello. But let me set the predicate. I was Secretary of Agriculture in the first Bill Clinton administration, but more importantly, I was a member of the Cotton Rice and Sugar Subcommittee for the House Ag Committee, and member of the House of Representatives for 7 years. And I really only participated in one farm bill, and I remember that farm bill vividly. There were 3 things going on with the environment. I remember that negotiation was not that contentious. Today it's much more polarized, as all of you know, particularly you, Congressman Vasquez. But back in those days, the conflict really wasn't between Republican and Democratic members. On the Farm Bill, it was between urban and rural. During those days, these were the counter-cyclical programs, advanced efficiency payments and target prices. And I remember the conflict between Chuck Schumer as vanguard of the urban members attacking payment limitations. He wanted to make sure that the revenue coming to the larger commodity producers were capped. And I understand that. On the other hand, the rural members, most of whom are very conservative, wanted to protect those farm payments, but they wanted to attack nutrition programs. Back during those days, food stamps, now SNAP program. So it wasn't that contentious. The second thing I remember, well, it was contentious, but not party related, only urban and rural related. The second is that the USDA participated, but they were on the tangent. They weren't central to the negotiation because both House and Senate Agriculture Committee wanted everyone to know that this bill was within their province and their ambit, and they would take suggestions from the USDA, but not so much. Then thirdly, the main issues were really commodity programs and nutrition. As I said, not so much rural development, hardly anything on climate. We didn't have insurance programs during those days, and so all those things were minimized. So now that's changed. So let's talk about the changes in this next farm bill, the areas of focus that you think will be prominent. And I'll turn to all 3 of you just to make an opening statement, and then we'll start with questions. So Congressman, you go first. How are you?
Thank you so much, Secretary. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, as well as our esteemed panelists. And it's exciting to be talking about the Farm Bill as it approaches. We're just hopefully a few months away from markup. But as you mentioned, I come from the 2nd District in New Mexico. It's I believe now, after redistricting, the 5th largest district in the country, a district bigger than the state of Pennsylvania, and also a district that has a rich agricultural legacy. Here in the Mesilla Valley, where I am from, we are famous for our green and red chili, our Pima cotton. We have one of the largest pecan grove operations in the country, I think only second to Georgia and the entire state of New Mexico. And of course, a long and rich legacy of raising cattle. But we also face a lot of challenges here. The most important amongst them is the availability of water, both subsurface and surface water, to continue these traditions, but also labor. I would put that at a close second. And
Yes.
so part of the interest that I have in working on the Farm Bill, serving both on the conservation and the forestry subcommittees, are both to continue to support those voluntary conservation programs that help keep our farms sustainable, that will help conserve water into the future, that will modernize our agricultural practices, that will allow our farms to continue to thrive, but also to make sure that we have the right type of labor opportunities to help support these programs that we will be funding in the Farm Bill. So those conversations are a bit separate from what we'll be doing in the Farm Bill, especially when it comes to the things of reform like the H-2A visa program. They're also incredibly important to have those discussions in a bipartisan way as part of the Agriculture Committee, since these are some of the largest challenges that are facing farmers today. I will mention also, before passing it on, that this district is also home to the former Congresswoman Xochitl Torres-Small, who is currently the Undersecretary of Rural Development at USDA and has been nominated to serve as the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Agriculture and is going through the confirmation process. So that's just to brag on our district a little bit. And yeah, thanks, Secretary.
I'm following her ascension at USDA, rural development. When I was there, it was a minor player, in the pantheon of all of the programs. And we try to elevate rural development. If commodity programs would be the leader, then certain rural development programs, water, sewer, broadband, all of that would run close second. So congratulations to you and to her. I believe she will be appointed Deputy Secretary of Agriculture. And so thank you for your opening statement. You got a very large, diverse district, but you're well qualified to participate in negotiations on the Farm Bill. Let's turn second to Ms. Bodie. How are you? And you're on the Senate side. You've served for a while with prominent senators with integral roles in agriculture. So tell us what you've been doing, what your principals are doing, and how you see this thing going in September.
Sure. Thank you so much, Secretary SB, and huge thanks to One Country for inviting us all here today to catch everyone up to speed on where we are with the 2023 Farm Bill. And yes, I say 2023. First, I think it's important to level set, maybe for those who aren't as important or aren't as familiar with the importance of the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is one of the largest investments that we make in clean air, clean water, and conservation in our country. It's focused on growing and protecting small town way of life, improving rural quality of life, creating new and better markets for our farmers. And it's also where we make our commitment as a nation to addressing hunger and food insecurity. The Farm Bill also obviously includes investments in a number of other important issues, including agricultural research, which are critical to ensuring that farmers have the tools that they need to remain profitable. The chairwoman has remained committed that the 2023 Farm Bill will continue the long bipartisan tradition here in the Senate. We have had a great working relationship with our counterparts, with Ranking Member John Bozeman of Arkansas, and really are looking forward to continuing on hammering away on each of these critical issues with them. We began our Farm Bill process on the Senate side with 2 field hearings, the first in the chairwoman's home state of Michigan, and the second in the Ranking Member's home state of Arkansas, where we heard from producers and local rural leaders about the needs facing rural America heading into this Farm Bill. The committee has finished a series of hearings on each title of the Farm Bill, and our subcommittees are also holding hearings with a number of stakeholders to continue to improve our engagement with both members and rural communities as we continue to craft this legislation. We've also solicited members from member input and a number of stakeholder inputs as well. And any of you listening can go now to agriculture.senate.gov and submit your Farm Bill priorities into our online portal as well. So as I mentioned, we look forward to continuing to work with Ranking Member Bozeman to continue to move this process forward in the coming months and hopefully reach a bipartisan agreement that can be signed into law by the president.
She said bipartisan agreement. Hopefully that'll happen. So we're going to go to Aaron, and then I want to go back. And my first question is going to be about these farm hearings. Uh, let's first hear from an active farmer, Aaron Lehman. Hello, Aaron.
Well, thank you, Secretary Espy, and thank you to One Country for spearheading this great discussion this morning. Our farm in central Iowa is not like a lot of farms in Iowa. We are facing a unprecedented amount of concentration in agribusinesses that control a lot of the inputs that we have to purchase and that control a lot of the markets we have to sell into. And that has resulted in the farmer getting less than 15 cents of every food dollar spent in this country. That's an all-time low. So one thing we would like to see is we would like to see the Farm Bill include a competition title so that farmers can receive the fairness in the marketplaces that they deserve and they can take advantage of economic opportunities in the marketplace. In addition to that, our farmers very much want to see our farm safety net updated to address current conditions on the farm. We know that we are in a very different price structure than we were than the last time we wrote the Farm Bill. So that will be extremely important. We also want to build off the investments that we've made in conservation and climate agriculture efforts, some of those historic investments that we've made. We want to see those build, and we want to see the results of those investments reach the farm and reach the field level. So we're very concerned about that. We also know that we have a lot of work to do to support our local and regional food systems that we are trying to build so that our farmers can be connected with their communities and the families in their communities, the consumers in their communities, and further to address those food insecurity issues that are so important to our rural areas here in Iowa and around the country. A strong nutrition program benefits us because we're producing the products that go into those nutrition programs, but because we know that food insecurity is very real in rural Iowa and rural America. So those are a couple of the highlights that we're hoping to talk about in the Farm Bill discussion. And again, thank you for having me on.
Thank you. My first question was going to be about the farm hearings, but Aaron, in your presentation, you talked about you want to introduce a new competition title. And you said, of course, quite correctly, that production agriculture is becoming more concentrated. But most people believe that's because economies of scale. Everything costs more input, equipment, and so you have to get larger to stay solvent. So how would your competition title, as you propose, how would it resolve this economic fact?
What we would like to see is efforts to encourage transparency in the marketplace, price discovery in the marketplace, and enforce some of the laws that we have in place already, including the Packers and Stockyards Act. In addition to that, we think that having strong measures in place to prevent manipulation in the marketplace, so farmers, whether they are large or small, whether they are connected or not, have fair access to fair markets in the marketplace.
All right. So sunlight is the best disinfectant. All right, I got you.
Excellent, Secretary.
So let's go back and talk about all these farm hearings. Michaela, you said the farm hearings have been expensive and they've now concluded. So what have you heard? Did you go everywhere? Did you go into the urban areas, Michaela? What have you heard in Texas, Congressman? What are the farmers talking about? And I'm interested in knowing those who appeared during the hearings, how many were farm producers and how many were the rural patrons? You know,
Well,
sewer and water and that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. So happy to talk to, especially on our rural issues. You know, we had a really great hearing back in the lame duck in November to really review the state of USDA rural development. As you mentioned, we too are very appreciative of the efforts of Undersecretary Torres Small in improving rural quality of life. And, that really, what rural development has continued to do to impact farm incomes is also, really important and something that we want to continue to take a look at. I think maybe, Secretary, to answer your question, maybe some of the new or interesting topics that have come up that were raised at our hearings, maybe that we wouldn't have thought as much about. One that traditionally has never really appeared in the Farm Bill is rural childcare. We heard time and again from producers, that they have issues accessing dependable, affordable rural childcare that is quality, for their children. We also heard about growing support for local and regional markets. Unfortunately, as you and Mr. Lehman alluded to, unfortunately, we've had former leaders at the department who were saying things like "get big or get out," right? And instead, we've seen this boom of programs at USDA, especially in rural development, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, to bolster local meat and poultry processing as well to help get at some of those competition issues. We also heard from farmers, obviously, about the importance of the farm safety net, which is critical, and we remain, committed to protecting the farm safety net. Since the last Farm Bill, farmers and producers have faced market disruptions and climate-induced extreme weather, everything from the war in Ukraine to the wildfires that some folks are experiencing the impacts of right now, wildfire smoke, right? And lastly, I would just mention too that we see this as a really critical opportunity to bring both urban and rural voices to the halls of Congress, and bringing rural folks to the forefront to be a part of the conversation is really important to us, and we're proud to say that we feel our hearings have done that, and we'll continue to do that at the subcommittee level.
How many urban
Yes.
hearings did you have? In urban areas.
We've only had those 2 field hearings in the chairwoman and ranking members' home states, and members across our committee have done events on their own, listening sessions with their farmers, which I think has also produced a lot of great stories. Everything from urban agriculture to which we had an urban agriculture producer appear at our field hearing in Michigan, for example, and also have some folks coming up to Washington from rural communities as well.
Thank you. Congressman, you participated, I'm sure, in these hearings. How did you find them? What do you remember from the hearings? And Mr. Lehman, you as well.
Well, thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Secretary. And we did have the opportunity to actually have Secretary Bill Sack in Albuquerque in the South Valley, where we do have a rich, agricultural tradition that is highly urbanized and also now comprises mostly of very small micro farms. And one of the concerns that we heard raised was about access to credit and FSA programs, and how the Farm Bill helps support those small producers that oftentimes, are able to have value-added products as the center of their business model. So not just folks that are growing row crops or that are cattle growers or that are producing, our nation's food in large quantities, but those who are creating small businesses from things like, growing lavender or turning red chili into paprika or red food coloring. Of course, the wine growers, folks like that who have kind of these niche operations that want better access for programs that traditionally provide the credit, and that includes, programs like EKIP and others, so that they can also be part of the larger agricultural landscape and have that value-added product be recognized as something that is valuable to the overall agricultural economy of this country. And so that's really important for a state like New Mexico, where because we do have limited water availability, we have to maximize the way that we produce goods. And that includes those USDA Rural Development Value-Added Product grants, but also includes things like rural broadband. We've heard from folks in the most remote corners of our district that they too would like to start small businesses and perhaps venture off into different opportunities to capitalize off of their farm products, but that requires starting a business, and starting a small business without broadband in a very rural part of the country is nearly impossible. And so we have heard loud and clear about how important USDA Rural Development's investments are in the rural broadband program, and how important it is to have in the ground connectivity. things like fiber optic lines, going to some remote areas that often come at a high cost to taxpayers, but truly to reach out to rural America to make sure that those folks who are in those very remote corners of our district, in my case, that they are supported to be self-sustainable by having the infrastructure that we can and we are investing, but making sure that that keeps and that continues to be well funded in the next farm bill. So that's one of the main takeaways that I've gotten, and that's something that Secretary Vilsack heard loud and clear from our folks here in New Mexico.
Absolutely. I was with Secretary Vilsack 2 weeks ago. He was here in Mississippi, and we talked about how USDA could do more for specialty crops like those you have in New Mexico, and also broadband. And I told him that I'd mentor a group of a following program, a STEM program, top students in Mississippi from low-income areas, and they are really great in coding, physics, science, and so forth. But after they leave school, when they go home to these remote areas, they can't get at the homework because the laptop they got for free, there's no connectivity. So we have a real problem with that in rural Mississippi. So he understood and doing more through RUS and RDA to address those. So thank you so much, Congressman. So Mr. Lehman, you're a farmer. So did you participate in these hearings? And if so, what were your impressions?
I did. In fact, there were a lot of farmers participating in Farm Bill forums of various different kinds. And all those issues that were discussed earlier were brought up in Iowa. And again, the competition issues were very, very high in people's mind. In addition to that, though, I also want to mention that there were some very good discussions about climate issues. And farmers recognize that we're in a changing climate, that there are additional costs to farmers because of the climate changing situation. And they also know that there are some real benefits that they can provide through farming practices that can help with climate mitigation. And the prevailing thought that came out of those meetings was that there needs to be more clarity on how farmers can participate and how they can benefit their communities through these actions and how their farm can benefit from these actions. And providing a little more clarity on how the whole structure about climate programs, I think, is a big priority for a lot of farmers.
Could we talk a little bit more about climate as well as the debt ceiling negotiations on climate? I noticed that the USDA just reorganized to create a new division for climate and forestry, headed by Undersecretary Homer Wilkes from Mississippi. So they've reorganized to really focus on climate. And I want to know what features in the Farm Bill, really align with what USDA is doing. And then secondly, I've watched here in Mississippi about the debt ceiling negotiations. Kudos to all of the legislators and President Biden for doing this. And a lot of it focused on work requirements for the SNAP program and what they're paying for nutrition. So how does that impact the Farm Bill? Now that the debt ceiling negotiations appropriated a ceiling, does the Farm Bill have to meet that ceiling? How does that, I'm really unsure how that works, aligning the debt ceiling negotiation with the Farm Bill nutrition title. So Michaela, how do you see that?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to start. And, first, let's be clear that it was critical for our economy and our families that we avoided default.
Yes.
We are certainly pleased to see that this agreement protects a lot of the important steps we've taken over the last few years to rebuild America, to build jobs, bring jobs home, lower the cost of healthcare, and tackle the climate crisis. When it comes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, especially, the chairwoman was deeply disappointed in the changes that were agreed to, and intends to produce a bipartisan farm bill that protects nutrition and food assistance for all Americans, including rural children, families, and seniors. As far as she's concerned, the issue of work requirements is settled for this Congress.
Yes.
There is no need to continue to erode the dignity of Americans who simply need a little bit of help getting through their grocery bill. To be clear, when we're talking about how much folks are receiving on SNAP, it's about $6 a day for the average family, right? So when we think about the debt ceiling and the impact that it's going to have, one, I think it sets the stage that now that this is off the table, we have a little bit more of a clear runway to get the Farm Bill done. Obviously, the Farm Bill operates in a baseline. So, the Farm Bill baseline is mainly untouched by the debt ceiling negotiations, right? In fact, having a debt ceiling deal arguably protected that baseline in a lot of different ways. But where we're likely going to see the impact is in these discretionary caps. Obviously, there are a lot of programs in the Farm Bill, like everything related to rural development and research, for example, at our land grant universities that are subject to discretionary appropriations. And our appropriators are going to be under some really, really tough funding pressures to come up with the funding, to carry out what we end up authorizing in the Farm Bill. So that dynamic is going to be a challenge for our appropriators. And I think also presents a challenge for us in writing the Farm Bill, knowing the reality of what appropriators are working with to put funds behind what we authorize.
I get it. Farm Bill's 5 years, debt ceiling's 2 years. Nutrition is an entitlement program with a baseline that may be impervious to the debt ceiling. Is that sort of what you're saying?
In addition to mandatory Farm Bill programs, right?
Yes. Right.
Our Farm Bill programs mandatory, farm safety net programs that are mandatory, nutrition programs that are mandatory. Yeah, largely untouched.
Congressman, how do you see the debt ceiling and the way it impacted the Farm Bill negotiations? And Aaron, do you have any comments to make on the debt ceiling negotiation and the spending for agriculture programs?
Well, I'll just say, Secretary, I think we just had a hearing in the House Agriculture Committee, a full committee hearing on SNAP yesterday. And one of the things that was left on the table post-debt limit negotiations was what, if any, changes to the SNAP program would be proposed, in my case, by House Republicans in the Agriculture Committee. And although I really hope to work with my colleagues across the aisle on this bipartisan agreement that we reached on non-discretionary spending, in particular, proposed cuts to SNAP, I think that there are still going to be attempts by some Republicans to cut food assistance programs like SNAP. I think we heard that loud and clear in committee yesterday. In fact, there's already been legislation introduced to do that. That includes some pretty harsh work requirements that would fundamentally change the entire nature of the SNAP program. Whether those are widely accepted by the members of the House Ag Committee or supported is yet to be seen, but those proposals are out there. Now, I'll mention that when folks attack SNAP as a program because of claims regarding fraud, double dipping, multi-enrollment, and other issues, I'll just point out that there is less than 1% of fraud to have been found in the SNAP program across the nation. And so we're talking about a very small portion, and we do have a group of investigators dedicated to finding fraud where it exists within the program that has corrected some of these issues. But it's a very, very, very small, less than 1% of the actual beneficiaries of SNAP who I think some folks are attacking as a way to try to gut the program, to impose more work limits, and to drastically reduce the SNAP budget. And so we are hearing those conversations. And I'll tell you, I do expect the Farm Bill to be a bipartisan negotiation. That's one of the reasons I joined the Ag Committee. One, it's so important to my district, but also I wanted to be productive in Congress and work on a bill that was a must-pass bill. And I think we're going to agree on the majority of things, including spending levels, especially for key programs and key titles. But SNAP is going to be the one program that I think we will continue to debate. However, I think that Democrats at least have made their stance strong, and some Republicans have as well, who voted for the debt limit bill and essentially voted to support, the very small changes made to SNAP, and in fact actually added enrollment for SNAP beneficiaries to include veterans and senior citizens over the next several years. So that was actually a positive that came out of the debt limit negotiations.
We actually have a question from the public, and Michaela and the congressman is sort of technical, but I was going to give it to Mr. Lehman. I'll read the question. It says the ARC and the PLC programs, agricultural risk coverage and price loss coverage, have been effective programs for larger commodity growers. Whole farm revenue programs have been beneficial for smaller, specialized, and diversified growers, perhaps like New Mexico growers, some of them. But there are still gaps remaining. What value do ARC and PLC bring, and what can be done to increase awareness of a whole farm revenue program? So, Michaela, Congressman, what do you think?
Sure. Well, happy to weigh
In
in.
my term, we didn't have those. We just had countercyclical, advanced efficiency payments, payment target prices, and so forth. All that's gone now.
Right.
We've got ARC and PLC, and how's it working?
Sure. So obviously, both of these programs are critical parts of what we would consider the farm safety net, right? And in crafting a bipartisan farm bill, we know that we will have to come up with a bill that serves the needs of all of our farmers, ranchers, and producers, regardless of where they are in the country. I think it is important to note that since the last farm bill, farmers and producers have certainly, like I mentioned, faced a lot of unique market disruptions and a lot of climate-induced extreme weather. Using CCC authority at the department and through Congress, there has been over $90 billion in ad hoc support to producers since the last farm bill. $90 billion. And so of course that begs the question of how is our current farm safety net working if that ad hoc spending is necessary? We see crop insurance as a strong safety net for our farmers. So as of April 10th of this year, there was about $17 billion in crop insurance indemnities that have put out to help cover all 2022 losses. So clearly, we strongly support crop insurance and want to continue to see that, carried through the next farm bill. Farmers are recording record farm income in recent years, but it's not so much about where that record farm income is if you're a small farmer, maybe, right? It's not equal across all kinds of operations. And so when we talk about new and better markets, we're talking about building up this resiliency to, reduce reliance on the farm safety net, but also know that there are plenty of desires from our members to make sure that it really is meeting the needs of our producers.
Right. Thank you.
And I'll just add to that, Secretary, that I think I've heard from many folks in different industries that have mentioned how important ARC and PLC are. Crop insurance programs really have helped to make sure that farmers stay in business when the market fluctuates and that they keep people fed. Most importantly, we don't have too many commodity growers in my district, but programs like these and crop insurance make our farmers whole. When they're down on their luck or when the market forces dictate. So the one aspect of this that I think I can anticipate there being a debate on, or perhaps some amendments introduced on, is related to the base acreage required for enrollment and PLC and ARC. And so what we're hearing is that medium-sized farmers and smaller farmers would like to be able to participate in both PLC and ARC. And so there's a move among some of those folks, the row crop growers in particular, that would like the base crop eligibility to be a little bit lower so that more folks can participate in the program. Now, whenever you do that, of course, that potentially increases the cost of the program, determining, to figure out how many folks will be potential enrollees into the program. And whenever you do that, because we will be probably at, the very similar spending levels to last year's budget, we will have to decide if that's something that the committee wants to look at and wants to do, where we would find cuts in other parts of the Farm Bill to be able to make up for that change. But that is one conversation that I've heard both amongst the producers and also members of the committee.
Thank you. We've got about 10 minutes left in this segment. I want to talk a little bit more about climate, but also trade and export programs. Last time I saw the figures on a global scale, the United States reduced one third of the production was really for domestic consumption, but 2/3 had to be sold for trade and exports. And I always felt like more could be done under the old GSM programs and PL 480 and all of that. So is there anything in this new farm bill that would facilitate greater export programs and trade programs? What's in the farm bill for trade and export?
I'll let the
Okay, I'll let
congressman
you
go
take
first
that
this
one.
time. No, I was letting him go first. Well, obviously, when we talk about creating new and better markets, that's what we're talking about, right? And the trade title of the Farm Bill remains very popular. Programs like MAP and FMD, we know, are critical in helping farmers secure, reasonable trade partnerships abroad. Look forward to continuing to see how we can make improvements to those programs. As the congressman said, there are a number of budgetary limitations we're facing in this farm bill, but share and understand how critically important those are. The often overlooked element of trade that exists in the trade title is food aid, right?
Yes.
Food aid lives in the farm bill, and ways that we can continue to provide that as a market for our farmers, but also to maintain our position as an important entity across the globe in providing hunger relief. But Congressman.
Congressman, are your specialty crops in New Mexico focused for trade profiles or just domestic consumption?
They are, in particular, our Pima cotton, which we export in large numbers to Japan, and our pecans, which also are great overseas exports to mostly the Indo-Pacific region, where they are considered to be highly regarded commodities there. So we do benefit quite a bit from the export economy when it comes to some of those specialty crops. I couldn't tell you exactly what's in the trade title of the farm bill that might be new or has changed over the last farm bill. I haven't had a chance to work too much on that title, but I can tell you that it is a critical piece of, especially as I mentioned before, some of these specialty growers that have developed markets overseas. And I think the most important part on that is the technical assistance that goes that can help support those farmers to actually develop products for export or for trade. I think that's really one of the key things that components that helps make some of those operations successful is being able to just build a business around the export of those products. And it's not always easy because the regulations involved, especially when shipping products internationally or actually just developing the business entity to do so. So I think that's where I'd like to see some more focus on.
Great. So let's go back to climate and conservation. In my memory, USDA really focused on mitigation of highly erodible croplands. You could erode your land into the leasing program and you wouldn't have to grow anything. So, Michaela, are those programs still here? I confess to you, I don't know the answer. I'm asking the experts. So what are the programs within the Farm Bill that promote conservation and climate mitigation oriented?
Sure. So, I think the one thing that farmers and rural Americans can all agree on is that the debate is over. The climate crisis is here. It's real, and it's hitting our farmers over the head every day, especially in the state of Michigan. The Great Lakes are warming faster than the oceans. Lake Superior, in fact, is one of the fastest warming lakes in the world. The Farm Bill is one of the largest investments that we make every year in our lands and in conservation. When it comes to extreme weather events, are also posing a real world threat, not only to the sustainability of the food system, but also may lead to future conflicts. We know that climate change is also having impacts when it comes to our specialty crop growers in Michigan, driving pests and fungi and other diseases for these food crops. that maybe we haven't seen before that require new and additional research. I will say that obviously the Inflation Reduction Act had historic investments to address the climate crisis, and a number of that funding, a sizable amount of that funding, is now at USDA. So there are sort of two segments of that, right? Our natural climate solutions and our man-made climate solutions. On the natural climate solutions side, the conservation programs in the Farm Bill that saw an increase during the Inflation Reduction Act pay farmers to adopt climate-friendly practices that are voluntary, popular, and very proven ways to address climate change and preparing for a future, unfortunately, more warm world. Right. Everything from EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Conservation Stewardship Program. Senator Stabenow has been a long champion of the Regional Conservation Partnership Program to bring private and public entities forward to help farmers address the climate crisis. So again, these programs put cash into farmers and ranchers' pockets to take carbon out of the air, making a healthier atmosphere, and then putting it back into the ground, which makes healthier soil for everybody, which is obviously a win-win. So again, the historic investment in IRA provided that needed infusion. Prior to the IRA, these programs were oversubscribed by our farmers as much as 3 to 1. So we really hope that now we are able to meet demand. On the man-made climate side, we often, when we talk about rural development, don't think as much about our rural electric co-ops. And in fact, the Inflation Reduction Act made the single largest investment in rural electric cooperatives since the New Deal, which is a really big deal, right? Helping our rural electric co-ops catch up to their for-profit entity counterparts and deploying renewable clean energy, maybe addressing some assets that don't necessarily serve that co-op anymore. And obviously in a co-op model, we're delivering cleaner and more affordable electricity for rural residents, which is most important. And finally, I'll just add that, we're also excited.
And broadband.
That's right. That's right.
Rural co-ops. Yes.
And yes, in the rural co-ops as well. And so really excited about those partnerships. And finally, I'll just add, we also in the Inflation Reduction Act made record investments in the Rural Energy for America program to help farmers address on-farm energy needs. Farmers can get up to a 50% cost share in the REAP program on renewables that they'd like to deploy on their farm, or that rural folks would like to deploy on their small business, as well as record investments in biofuel infrastructure. So, we're really laser focused on protecting these programs during the upcoming Farm Bill, but also making sure that they're implemented at USDA in a way that's accessible to our farmers.
Thank you. That's great. Congressman, what about climate change? What elements do you see within the new Farm Bill that are there, and what are those that you wish they would do more about?
Sure. Well, first I'll just say I think this is the best bipartisan conversation we can have in Congress about climate that is really focused on solutions and has data-driven projects on the ground that can really demonstrate the impact that federal investment has, in particular in our rural communities and with farmers and with cattle growers and other folks who see the impacts firsthand, but also understand the impacts that climate has to their businesses. They understand the impact of shorter watering cycles, of longer wildfire seasons, of hotter climate, and all the things that come with the practicality of having to operate a business in rural America are impacted by climate. And so CSP and RCPP and EQIP are terrific voluntary programs that show the strength of the bipartisan agreements that we've made in the Farm Bill in the past, that should guide conversations, I think, at a larger scale in Congress about these investments that Michaela mentioned as related to the IRA and other federal investments that we can make outside of the Farm Bill that eventually, will make it home to these farmers and these ranchers in districts like mine. So those are important. Now, I am excited, that these programs have strong bipartisan support. I think mostly universal amongst the House Agriculture Committee, but also that we are looking at some new innovations of how we can modernize these programs. One of the efforts that I'm working on is a bill that I'm hoping that makes it into the Farm Bill that would address advancing wildlife corridors and connectivity across farmlands, again, as a way to help support ranchers and farmers to be financially sustainable while also supporting these critical wildlife corridors and connectivity for species like mule deer and pronghorn antelope and Coues deer and, you name it. But also in a component that would allow programs like EQIP to also implement things like virtual fencing. We have had some pilots in Wyoming. There's one actually in the Four Corners area, including in northwest New Mexico, where we are looking at virtual fencing to improve wildlife connectivity, to control the movement of cattle through the incentivization of virtual fencing that can control livestock distribution in rangeland landscapes without the physical pasture fences that we are so used to. Now, this can also help with the restoration of native grasslands, for things like lesser prairie chicken or the sage grouse, or a variety of other different species, without the, of course, investment in the physical infrastructure. The pasture fences that traditionally have been difficult, especially for very remote and rural areas to manage. And so I'm excited about using technology and, in fact, a little bit of AI, Secretary, into how this all works. Right, and that also includes water distribution systems in places like New Mexico. Is how can we support these programs to be innovative and support innovation, so that once we went from windmills to solar panels to operate our wells, now let's go to software and AI technology that requires rural broadband. I might say, Secretary, to also have smart watering practices that can help also save on labor costs for ranchers, that have to go check on wells in very remote areas, that keep their livestock healthy, but also promote water conservation in a way that we currently can't do. So I think the evolution of what these programs can pay for is where the bread and butter is at for this future farm bill, because we're only going to have 5 years to do that. And you know what? In 5 years, we've seen where AI is today. If we don't harness the power of some of these new tools and this new software for conservation programs in the farm bill, we won't get another shot at it for another 5 years. And I think it's important that we look at those seriously in this farm bill, and that's an exciting initiative that I'm proud to help support.
Absolutely. Well, we've got about 2 minutes left. We're going to wrap up and go to the health care battle. But I'll tell you, it's been a great conversation. I want to give each one of you about 30 seconds to wrap up. But from my standpoint, from Jackson, Mississippi, what I see and what I hear expertise, and I see and feel passion. You both are passionate about this issue. You're grounded in expertise. We got a new 5-year farm bill coming up. Hopefully, it will happen by September, and we'll set the predicate for a country that's more technological, that's more diverse, and with a view of more experts in global outreach. That's what I see from you. I'm sorry we lost that one panelist, but you guys have more than covered. So I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up, and we'll say goodbye when you finish, and we'll go to the healthcare in rural America panel. So Michaela, let you go first, and we'll let the elected official take us home.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Secretary Espy. And again, thanks to One Country for having us. I grew up in a farm family, and being here on Capitol Hill to bring the voice of rural America is something that's near and dear to my heart. When I think about what folks back home are talking about, right? Folks in Ohio, folks in Michigan, folks in Iowa, all the way out to Nevada, right? One of the key themes that I keep hearing again and again from folks is a question about, will our kids come back? How do we make sure that our kids come back to rural America, right? How do we keep them here? How do we create places where they want to live and grow a business and raise a family, right? And, I don't think that we can overstate just how critical that feeling is for rural Americans, like my family and others, right? And part of that is improving rural quality of life. It's making sure that the Farm Bill reflects that it has to be a jobs bill, right? It has to be filled with economic opportunity, entrepreneurial opportunity for young folks, and to protect the folks who are there already and growing their businesses with the next latest greatest technology, and assistance to make sure that we're not allowing our rural communities to fall behind our urban counterparts when it comes to things like healthcare and broadband and childcare, right? So we really see this opportunity again for Congress to show its commitment to rural America and to rural jobs and rural quality of life, and look forward to creating a bipartisan product that does just that.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Congressman?
Thank you again, Secretary. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here joining you all today. Michaela, couldn't have said it better. You're absolutely right. The Farm Bill is our chance to really make an imprint, not just on rural America, but when we look at SNAP and TFAP and other food assistance programs, the impact that rural America has on urban communities. And Secretary, you mentioned that perhaps was one of the divides or one of the
Yes.
talking points between folks from different districts. And although the politics are a lot more contentious probably today on very strict and hard drawn political lines, I think that we still continue to see some good bipartisanship in the House Agriculture Committee that makes me very hopeful for being able to work with my colleagues apart from the Farm Bill on other issues that are important to our districts, including very large rural districts like mine. And so that gives me hope that we will continue the progress as we hopefully show the country and we show some of our colleagues that we can produce in a bipartisan way a wonderful Farm Bill in a divided Congress and make the right decisions, not just for rural communities, but as I mentioned, for those rural recipients and for our nation's food security, for strengthening our nation's food system, for making sure that those farmers and folks who decide to live in those rural communities and try to inspire the next generation of farmers and ranchers are also able to make a living, and that we support those mid-sized and those small farms, those aspiring farmers out there who are just starting out, to those legacy families who have been farming and ranching and raising dairies for 5 or 6 generations. We want to make sure that there's something in there for everybody, and I think we'll be able to do that. So I'm excited for us to continue the conversation amongst great leadership here in the House Agriculture Committee, and to be a wonderful part of this solution to bring services to rural America, to help improve our nation's food supply and food security, and also to make sure that we bridge that urban-rural divide that you talked about in a bill just like this. I think we can do it. I know we're going to do it. Thank you again, Secretary. I appreciate it.
I believe we can do it. So well done, both of you. On behalf of our One Country Project, thank you for volunteering your time today. I feel really good about who's managing this from the legislative side and from the staff side. It looks good to me. So thank you very much. So thank you so much, Michaela and Congressman Vasquez. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.